The November rain came down in icy sheets, slicking the pavement in front of the boutique cafe with mirror-like reflections of city lights and gray skies. The world outside was wet and unforgiving, a blur of umbrellas, honking taxis, and the hurried shuffle of boots on concrete. But inside the cafe, it was warm golden lights glowing against wood-paneled walls, steam rising in lazy curls from mugs, and the quiet murmur of conversations unfolding over clinking silverware. Lucy stood on the sidewalk, a small figure swallowed by a tattered coat 3 sizes too big. The sleeves covered her hands entirely, but she didn't pull them back. The coat was her shield against the cold, her armor against the world. Rain had soaked her through anyway. Her canvas sneakers squelched with each step, and her dark hair clung to her forehead in wet strands. She shivered, but didn't move away from the glass dot. Instead, she leaned closer, her breath fogging a small patch of the window. Through it, she watched. A man in a slate gray suit sat at the far end of the cafe, his elbows on the table, face buried in his hands. His shoulders rose and fell like a tide trying to hold back grief, but failing. In front of him sat a boy 4, maybe 5, perfectly still. He had dark, straight hair, neatly combed. His sweater was spotless. His hands were folded on his lap, unmoving, as he stared blankly at a plate of pancakes drizzled with syrup that had begun to pool along the edge of the plate. He hadn't touched them. Lucy's stomach growled. She pressed one hand tighter around the crumpled dollar bill in her pocket, her only treasure, soaked and flimsy now. Barely enough for a plain bun, maybe half a muffin if she begged. But she didn't tear her eyes away from the boy. She knew that expression, that haunted, hollow gaze. She'd seen it in the mirror of a soup kitchen bathroom not long after her mother died. The way the world seemed far away, voiced as muffled, food tasteless. It was the look of someone who'd stopped hoping the pain would end and simply learned to live with it. Inside, the man lifted his head, eyes red-rimmed and lined with exhaustion. He reached across the table, but the boy didn't respond. "Please, buddy," the man said, his voice cracking like a twig underfoot. "Just one bite. Mommy would want you to eat. She'd be so worried if she saw you like this." The boy didn't blink, didn't even glance toward the plate. Lucy felt something stir in her chest, a twist of understanding. Hunger was one thing. She was used to that. Its sharp edge had dulled months ago. But this was different. This was hard hunger, a kind that pancakes couldn't fill. Without thinking, Lucy reached for the door. A little bell jingled above her head as she stepped into the warmth, and the contrast nearly made her gasp. Her soaked sneakers squeaked against the floor. Heads turned. Conversations dipped. She ignored them all. No one stopped her. No one asked what a drenched street girl was doing in their pretty little cafe. Maybe they didn't care. Maybe they didn't notice. Maybe she was invisible again. She walked slowly to the table in the corner, the man's eyes flicking up in confusion and alarm as she approached. He opened his mouth, clearly ready to send her away, but Lucy didn't flinch. She simply looked at the boy and then at the man and said in a quiet, certain voice, "He misses someone, doesn't he?" The man stared, unsure, disbelieving, and then, slowly, he nodded. The man didn't answer right away. He looked at Lucy as if he wasn't sure she was real. This soaked, skinny child who had wandered up to their table like she belonged there. Her oversized coat dripped onto the polished floor, leaving tiny puddles around her sneakers. Her cheeks were pink from the cold, but her eyes were sharp and sad, like someone who had seen too much and learned to survive anyway. He cleared his throat, voice hoarse. "Yes," he said finally, almost like it hurt to admit. "He misses his mom. She passed away 2 months ago." The little boy still hadn't moved. He didn't look at Lucy, didn't even blink, just kept his gaze fixed somewhere far away, through the wall, through the world. "I know that kind of missing," Lucy said softly. Pulling out the chair across from the boy without waiting for permission, she climbed up carefully, the wet coat squishing beneath her as she sat. "It's the kind that makes food taste like air and days feel like rocks in your pockets." The man swallowed. "Who are you?" he asked. She shrugged. "Lucy, that's a pretty name." His voice cracked. He rubbed a hand over his face. "I'm Daniel, and this is Evan." Lucy turned her attention fully to the boy. He didn't flinch as she leaned in a little closer, speaking in the same low, kind tone someone might use to coax a frightened animal. "Hi, Evan," she said. "I know you don't want to eat. I didn't want to either after my mom got sick and went away. Nothing tasted right anymore, not even peanut butter, and that used to be my favorite. No response? Lucy reached into the inner lining of her coat and carefully pulled out a tiny scrap of laminated paper, faded, worn around the edges, but clearly important. She laid it gently on the table. "My mom gave me this," she explained to Daniel without taking her eyes off Evan. "It's her cooking song. She used to sing it when we made toast together, said food works better if it's got love in it." Daniel blinked. "A cooking song?" Lucy nodded. "It's silly, but when I hum it, sometimes it makes things taste a little better. Not like before, but almost." For the first time, Evan moved, just barely. His fingers twitched in his lap, and his head tilted a fraction toward the paper. "You want to hear it?" Lucy asked him. Still no answer, but she took the tiny spark of attention as permission. She began to hum softly, gently. It wasn't polished or fancy, just a simple melody, something like a lullaby. The sound was warm, even in the sterile air of the upscale cafe. A hum that reminded Daniel of soft hands wiping flour from a toddler's cheeks, of laughter over a boiling pot, of home. As Lucy hummed, she tore off a small piece of pancake with her fingers and placed it near Evan's plate. "Maybe if I sing," she whispered, "it'll taste like love again." Daniel watched, unable to speak, as Evan's eyes moved slowly, as if through thick fog toward the pancake. His tiny hand reached forward, not for the piece, but for the paper. His fingers rested on the edge of the worn scrap. Lucy smiled, still humming, her voice barely above the rain tapping the window behind them. Evan whispered, almost inaudibly, "Mommy sang too." Daniel closed his eyes. Something inside him broke and then shifted. Not pain this time, not despair. Something new, something like hope. "Lucy," he said quietly, would you come home with us?" She looked at him warily. "Why?" "Because I think you might be the only one who knows how to help him." He hesitated. "And maybe help me, too." Lucy looked back at Evan. He was still touching the song. She nodded. "Okay, but only if I get to cook pancakes with songs." The ride to Daniel's home was quiet. Rain slid in rivulets down the tinted windows of the black SUV, the wipers brushing it away with rhythmic determination. Lucy sat stiffly in the leather seat, Daniel beside her, typing something urgently into his phone. Evan sat on the other side, curled against the door, his head leaning on the window, eyes half-lidded and distant, but his hand still clutched the small scrap of paper, Lucy's mother's cooking song, as if it were a lifeline. Lucy didn't speak. Her fingers picked nervously at the frayed edges of her sleeve. She kept glancing at Evan, wondering if he'd say something again, wondering if the humming had really worked, or if it had just been one of those moments, short and flickering, like the warmth of a candle before the wind blew it out. Daniel wasn't sure what to think. His son hadn't responded to anyone in nearly 6 weeks. No therapist, no nanny, no bribes or threats or soft voices. But this little girl, soaked, shivering, wrapped in a coat that clearly wasn't hers, had walked into a cafe and somehow cracked the silence. Just a little, just enough to bring him back from the edge. He glanced at her now. This strange girl, who looked too small for the strength she carried. "You really just came in because of Evan?" he asked, voice quiet. Lucy nodded. Daniel frowned slightly. "But you don't know him." Lucy gave a little shrug. "Didn't need to. I saw his eyes." She hesitated, then added, "That's how my eyes looked after my mom died. Like the world was gone and no one noticed." Daniel didn't answer. The SUV pulled into the underground garage of a luxury high-rise that rose like a tower of glass and steel into the rainy skyline. Everything gleamed. Everything was clean. Polished concrete, chrome elevators, and the soft beep of access panels that required no keys, just fingerprints and silence. Lucy's sneakers squeaked on the marble floors. She hugged her arms around herself as they stepped into the elevator. It smelled like lemon-scented air freshener and something else, something sharp and clinical. When they reached the penthouse, the elevator opened into a living room that looked like a showroom. Vast windows framed the city lights like artwork. There were velvet couches, a fireplace that flickered even though no wood burned, and a kitchen that shone like no one had ever used it. It didn't feel like a home. It felt like a place where someone used to be happy. Evan wandered toward the corner where a set of blocks sat untouched. He didn't touch them. He just sat, knees to his chest, holding Lucy's paper in both hands. "Make yourself comfortable," Daniel said. He ran a hand through his hair. "I'll get someone to bring you some dry clothes." We have, he faltered. We had a guest room. Lucy stepped toward the kitchen. She looked up at the cabinets, the granite countertops, the chrome appliances that hummed faintly. Everything was spotless, untouched, sterile. No one cooks here, she said. Daniel flinched. I've tried. I had a chef, but Evan wouldn't eat anything they made. Not even food Sarah, my wife, used to make. Because it's not just the food, Lucy said gently. It's the love inside it. The part you can't see. Daniel sat down heavily on one of the stools at the island. He looked like he hadn't slept in days, maybe weeks. She always sang when she cooked. He murmured. Little songs. Nonsense, mostly. Evan used to dance to them in the kitchen. I never thought it meant anything. Lucy walked to the refrigerator and opened it. It was full overflowing, with containers, sauces, vegetables so perfectly arranged it looked like a magazine photo. But something was wrong. No stories in this fridge, she said quietly, just stuff. Daniel looked at her, confused. My mom used to say that real kitchens tell stories. You can tell who lives in a place by what's in their fridge. This fridge just says, someone bought this, but nobody cared. He swallowed. How old are you? 8. You talk like someone twice that. She shrugged. The streets age you fast. Daniel looked toward Evan, then back at Lucy. Why did you really come over? She turned, met his gaze, because he needed me, and I think you did, too. There was a beat of silence between them, the kind that feels like it stretches just a little too long, holding something unsaid. I can't cook, Daniel said finally. Not like Sarah did. Lucy nodded. Then I'll teach you, but we'll have to start small, with magic toast. Daniel blinked. Magic toast? She smiled. Trust me, it's the easiest way to start putting love back in the food. And for the first time in weeks, Daniel didn't argue. Asterisk the kitchen, for all its beauty, felt like a museum. Gleaming marble counters, spotless stovetops, designer appliances humming quietly like they were waiting for someone to remember what they were for. Everything was immaculate. Everything was wrong. Lucy stood barefoot on the cool tile floor, Daniel's coat now draped over a stool as she rolled up the sleeves of an oversized sweatshirt one of the staff had found for her. Her soaked clothes were drying somewhere in a laundry room bigger than the shelter she'd slept in last month, but even now, standing in the kitchen fit for a magazine spread, she didn't feel out of place. She felt needed across the room. Daniel hovered awkwardly near the fridge, holding a loaf of bread in one hand and looking like it might explode if he opened it wrong. Is that the right one? He asked, lifting the plastic bag. Lucy tilted her head. Is it soft? Not moldy? He checked. It's fresh. Then it's perfect. She stepped forward and took the bread from him, setting it gently on the counter like it was something fragile. Daniel watched her carefully. I still don't understand how this works. It's not complicated, Lucy said as she opened a cabinet, found a pan, and placed it on the stove. But it's not just toast. It's magic toast. He tried not to smile. Right? Of course. You have to say nice things to the bread, she said seriously. Tell it what it's doing for someone. Like, thanks for being soft and warm. Evan's tummy really needs you. Daniel blinked. You. Talk to the bread? Not just bread. Everything. Lucy grabbed the butter from the fridge and set it beside the stove. You have to treat the food like it wants to help. If you do, it listens. Daniel sat at the kitchen island. Watching her, it should have been absurd. A child humming to toast and giving therapy to butter, but something about the way she moved, the care she used, made it feel like a ritual, sacred, like a song whispered to ghosts. She flicked on the burner, placed the bread in the pan, and began to hum. The same melody as before, soft and curling through the air like smoke, warm, familiar. Evan, still seated in the corner, lifted his head. The paper with his mother's song was clutched in one hand, slightly crumpled now from being held so tight. Is he watching? Lucy asked quietly, not breaking the rhythm of her tune. Daniel turned. He's looking. Then we sing. She didn't wait for Daniel to object. She began again, louder now, making up lyrics on the spot. Golden toast, don't burn. Today, warm his heart and chase clouds away. Melt the butter, soft and slow. Let his smile begin to grow. Her voice wasn't perfect, but it was sweet and steady and strong in the way that mattered. Daniel stared. Sarah, she used to sing things like that while she stirred soup or made pancakes. I never realized he was listening. He was holding onto it, Lucy flipped the toast in the pan with practiced ease. That's why he stopped eating. It wasn't about the food. It was about the songs, about the way she made it feel like love. When the toast was done golden, slightly crisp at the edges, she placed it on a plate and set it gently on the island. "We don't make him eat it," she said. "We just let him smell it. Let the song be there." Daniel carried the plate like it was a holy offering and crouched beside his son. "Buddy," he whispered, "Lucy made this. She sang it warm." Evan looked at the toast. His face twitched. His lips moved, but no sound came out. Then, slowly, he whispered, "Mommy used to sing, 'Butter stars melt on bread.'" Daniel felt the air leave his lungs. Lucy didn't say anything. She just stepped closer, sat beside them on the floor, and began humming again. Evan reached out, touched the edge of the toast, just for a second. Then, like a miracle breaking through weeks of gray, he took a bite. Daniel covered his mouth with one hand, eyes filling with tears. He couldn't speak. Evan chewed slowly, swallowed, looked at Lucy. It feels warm in my tummy." Lucy smiled. "That's the magic." Daniel laughed. It came out broken, half sob, half disbelief. "You did it. You actually." Lucy looked up at him, and for the first time, her voice trembled a little. "It's not me. It's just the songs, the love. I just remembered how to use it." He stared at her, something in his chest aching open. "Where did you learn all this, Lucy?" She hesitated, then quietly said, "From my mom, before she went away." The kitchen fell silent. Not cold this time, just still, peaceful, like it had remembered something long forgotten. Daniel rose to his feet slowly. He looked around his massive, gleaming kitchen, the space that had once been filled with laughter and soft songs and silly words tossed over. "Cutting boards and whisks, would you?" He cleared his throat. "Would you stay with us tonight? We have plenty of space. Evan, he hasn't eaten in weeks. You got him to eat. That means more than I can say." Lucy looked at Evan, who now had butter on his chin and a tiny, sleepy smile creeping into the corners of his mouth. She nodded. "I'll stay, but only if we make soup tomorrow." Daniel smiled. "Deal." The guest room felt like something out of a magazine. Plush white bedding, a window view of the skyline, a soft lamp casting golden light on the polished floor. But Lucy sat on the edge of the bed, stiff and alert, her bare toes curling on the carpet like they didn't trust how soft it was. She clutched her coat tightly, even though it was dry now, and even though the sweatshirt she wore smelled like lavender and comfort. Across the hall, she could hear the quiet murmur of Daniel's voice through the baby monitor he'd reconnected. He was reading a story to Evan, something about stars and gentle bears. Evan was giggling. Actual giggles. Lucy hadn't heard that kind of sound from him all day, not until after the toast. She smiled a little, then frowned. The truth weighed heavy in her chest. It always did when night came. That moment when the world was quiet and warm and safe, but only if you belonged to it. She reached under the bed where she'd hidden her backpack. It was old, stained, the zipper held together by a loop of wire. She pulled it onto the bed and unzipped it slowly, checking everything inside. Her emergency socks. Her mom's cooking song, now laminated, curled slightly at the edges. A folded newspaper clipping she'd read 100 times, the ink smudged from rain and fingers. And the paper, her file, the one she'd taken the night she ran. She hadn't meant to steal it, but it had been sitting on the caseworker's desk, open, with words she wasn't supposed to read. 8 years old. History of instability, multiple behavioral incidents, possible fabrication of abuse, withdrawn, prone to fantasy. Lucy had stared at the words for a long time before slipping the folder into her backpack. She didn't know what prone to fantasy meant, but she knew what they thought it meant. That she lied, that she made things up about Mr. Beck, the man who called himself her temporary guardian but kept the doors locked, and whispered horrible things to the older girls when the lights were off. She told the social worker. She told them, but they didn't believe her. Said she was acting out, said she had trouble attaching. So she left. She walked for days, slept in parks, begged quietly at street corners. Then one morning, at a bus stop, she found a discarded newspaper. On the front page was a photo. Millionaire widower's son still refusing to eat 2 months after mother's death. The boy was small, with hollow cheeks and a sad stare. She saw herself in him instantly. She didn't know why, but something inside her whispered, "Find him. He needs you, Da." So she did. Now she was here, in a room that smelled like clean linen and lemon soap, with a father down the hall who offered her a place to sleep, with a boy who giggled at bedtime and tasted toast that felt like home. She pressed the folder shut and pushed it back under the bed, her fingers trembling just a little. She didn't want to lie, but if she told the truth, if she told Daniel who she really was, what would happen? He'd call CPS. He'd return her like a package that didn't belong. He was kind, but she'd seen how adults changed when rules got involved. A soft knock pulled her from her thoughts. The door opened slightly and Daniel peeked in. "You still awake?" Lucy quickly let go of the folder and pulled her knees up, trying to look small and harmless. "Yeah." He stepped inside, holding a glass of water. "Evan's asleep, out cold." He chuckled. He hasn't done that since before. He handed her the glass. She took it with both hands and nodded her thanks. Daniel sat in the armchair across from the bed, elbows on his knees. "I just wanted to say thank you again. You don't know what you did tonight." Lucy looked down. "It was just toast." He shook his head. "It was more than that." There was silence for a moment. Then he asked, gently, "Where are your parents?" Lucy, her heart skipped. She took a long sip of water before answering. "My mom. She got sick, really sick. She died almost 2 years ago." Daniel's eyes softened. "I'm sorry. And your dad?" She shrugged. "I think he left before I could remember him." Another silence. Daniel didn't press. "I know I should probably call someone," he said after a while. "A guardian, a social worker. But I also know how scared you looked when I mentioned that earlier." Lucy kept her gaze locked on the rim of the glass. Her voice was barely audible. "Please don't. Are you in trouble?" he asked. She didn't speak. He leaned forward. "Lucy, did someone hurt you?" Her throat tightened. She nodded. "Just once." Daniel exhaled slowly. "You don't have to tell me everything right now. But I want you to know this is a safe place. I won't let anyone hurt you here. And if there's a way to make it okay for you to stay, we'll find it." She looked up at him then, for the first time, really looked, and what she saw in his face wasn't pity or fear. It was promise. Real promise. She swallowed the lump in her throat. "I'm not used to sleeping in beds." He smiled. "Well, this one's yours tonight. No strings, no locks, just warmth." As he stood and walked to the door, she called out, "Daniel." He turned. If I taught you how to cook something my mom used to make, would you try?" He nodded. "Name it." She smiled. "Just a little. Tomorrow, we make sunshine soup." He laughed under his breath. "All right, sunshine soup it is." Then he turned off the light, and for the first time in a long, long time, Lucy slept. The next morning, golden sunlight filtered through floor-to-ceiling windows, casting gentle beams across the pristine penthouse kitchen. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It felt like the quiet before something good, like the world was holding its breath for what might come next. Lucy stood barefoot on a step stool at the kitchen island, sleeves rolled up, her tangled hair pulled into a loose ponytail by Mrs. Elkins, the housekeeper, who had arrived early and already taken a quiet, warm liking to her. The older woman didn't ask questions. She simply brought Lucy a soft hairbrush, a pair of clean socks, and called her honey in a voice that felt like flannel. Daniel leaned on the other side of the island, watching as Lucy arranged a neat little army of vegetables in front of her: carrots, celery, onion, potatoes. A bunch of parsley sat off to the side like a garnish of promise. "All right," Daniel said, still slightly skeptical. "Sunshine soup." Lucy grinned. "It's the best. My mom used to say it could warm your heart even if everything else felt cold." Evan sat nearby in his pajamas, legs swinging under his chair, fingers drumming against the counter. He didn't speak much, but he watched closely. His eyes followed Lucy's hands. His body tilted just slightly in her direction like a sunflower chasing warmth. Lucy turned to Daniel and nodded solemnly. "Okay, first rule, no grumpy cooking." He blinked. "Grumpy cooking? You can't make sunshine soup with a grumpy heart. You gotta thank the veggies before you chop them." Daniel chuckled. "You're serious." "Very," she said, picking up a carrot and holding it up like it was a microphone. "Thank you for growing strong in the dirt, Mr. Carrot. You're gonna make someone feel better today." Evan smiled. Daniel hesitated, then reached for a stalk of celery. He cleared his throat. Thank you for being so green. Lucy nodded approvingly. That's a good start. Mrs. Elkins chuckled quietly from the pantry. Pretending not to watch, they chopped together, Lucy instructing like a tiny general, careful, serious, but with a bubbling kind of joy that turned each step into something sacred. Every vegetable added to the pot was treated like a friend. Every stir of the spoon came with a song. Swirl the sunshine in the soup. Bring the light where there was gloom. Warm the belly. Hug the heart. Help a little soul restart. Evan hummed along without realizing. When Lucy handed him a wooden spoon, he didn't flinch. He just took it, held it tight, and whispered, "Hello, soup." Daniel had to step away for a moment. The lump in his throat wouldn't go down. Later, with the soup simmering, the kitchen filled with a scent that didn't belong to restaurants or grocery stores. It belonged to homes, real homes, homes that laughed and sang and cried and healed. Together, Daniel ladled the soup into 3 bowls. Careful not to spill a drop, he placed one in front of Evan, one for Lucy, and one for himself. They sat in silence. Evan picked up his spoon, eyes wide. He took a slow, tiny sip, then another, then a full mouthful. He swallowed, turned to Lucy, and whispered, "It tastes like hugs." Lucy smiled softly. "That's the sunshine part." Daniel tried his own. It was simple: carrots, potatoes, onion, broth, but somehow it tasted like his wife's laughter, like Evan's giggle before bedtime, like hope. They ate quietly together, not just with mouths but with something deeper. Each bite was a memory remade, a crack in the grief letting light through. After breakfast, Daniel walked Lucy to the guest room where she had left her backpack under the bed. "Hey," he said gently, "do you have someone I should call? Someone who's looking for you?" Lucy froze. Her spoon clattered into the bowl. Daniel held up his hands. "You don't have to answer, but if you want to stay here, I'll have to know what I'm up against. CPS, the system, they don't let kids just disappear." She hesitated, then slowly reached under the bed and pulled out the warrant folder. Daniel took it, opened it, and scanned the first few pages. His jaw tightened. "They said you were making it up." She nodded once. "They said you were unstable." She shrugged. "I wasn't what they wanted, so they made me someone else on paper." Daniel closed the file. He handed it back to her carefully, like it was something fragile. "I've read enough," he said. "You're not going anywhere." Lucy looked up. "But won't they come for me?" "Yes," he said honestly, "but I'll be ready." She opened her mouth to speak, but a sudden noise interrupted them. The apartment's front intercom buzzed. Daniel walked to the console and tapped the screen. A voice came through, clipped and professional. "This is Officer Dana Carver from Child Protective Services. We're following up on a report about a minor possibly matching the description of Lucy Harper, missing from state care 3 weeks ago." Lucy's breath caught. Daniel turned back toward her. Her face had gone pale. "They found me," she whispered. Daniel stared at the monitor. His voice dropped to a low, still tone. "Let me handle this." He tapped the mic button. "I'll be down in a moment," he said to the voice on the other end. "But just so you know, I have legal counsel and video footage of your agency's previous neglect. You might want to come prepared for a longer conversation." Then he turned to Lucy. "Go sit with Evan. Tell him a new song. Keep him safe." And without waiting for her answer, Daniel Grayson, father, widower, tech CEO, and man who hadn't cooked in years, walked toward the elevator with the fire of a man who had something to protect. Someone to protect. Asterisk. Lucy sat on the carpet beside Evan's building blocks, but she wasn't playing. Her legs were crossed, hands in her lap, but her eyes stayed locked on the hallway where Daniel had disappeared. She was trying not to panic, but her chest felt too tight, like the whole world had suddenly shrunk to this one apartment, one room, one moment. "They're going to take me away," she whispered. Evan looked up from the tower he was quietly assembling, tilting his head in that thoughtful, slow way of his. He didn't speak. Instead, he crawled over and sat beside her, close, enough that their arms touched. "They said I was a liar," Lucy continued. Her voice was small, thinner than usual. "They said I made it all up to get attention." Evan didn't respond. He simply reached into his pajama pocket and pulled out the folded cooking song, the one Lucy had let him borrow. He unfolded it with care and pressed it gently into her hand. "Magic," he whispered. "Real." Lucy's throat tightened. The smallest smile tugged at the corner of her mouth, though her eyes still shimmered with fear. In the kitchen, Mrs. Elkins stirred the last of the soup quietly on the stove. She'd seen a lot in her years. Broken families, grieving hearts, messy rich people who had no clue how to raise children, but she had never seen anything like this. A little girl with holes in her shoes and warmth in her voice, bringing life back into a house made of sadness. She wiped her hands on her apron and moved quietly into the hallway. "You okay in here?" she asked. Lucy nodded, even though she wasn't sure. Evan answered for both of them. "She's my best friend." Lucy blinked. Her heart did something strange. Mrs. Elkins smiled, but there was a question in her eyes. "What happened to you, Lucy, before this?" Lucy looked down. "Stuff people don't want to hear about." "I do." Lucy hesitated. Then, in a whisper, she began. She told her about Mr. Beck, the foster man with too many kids in a house too small, how he'd lock the fridge at night and call them names that made Lucy's skin crawl, how he'd never hit her, not directly but left bruises with words, threats, and silence, and how the worst part wasn't the pain, it was not being believed. It was being labeled a storyteller, as if her truth was just a chapter in someone else's fiction. "I didn't run away to be bad," she whispered. "I ran because it was the only way I could survive." Mrs. Elkins listened. No interruptions, no disbelief, just quiet tears in the corners of her eyes. "You are not a problem child," she said softly. "You are a miracle, Lucy." Footsteps echoed from the marble hallway. Daniel was back. His jaw was tight, but his eyes were lit with something fierce. "They're not taking you," he said the moment he stepped into the room. Lucy stood up quickly. "But they said I was a ward of the state, that they had a court order." Daniel shook his head. "Their order doesn't mean what they thought. I have lawyers working on an emergency guardianship motion, and they're going to press for an abuse investigation based on the file you brought. Your story is already starting to match with 3 other reports filed in the last year, ones they ignored." Lucy's hands flew to her mouth. "So, I'm not going back." "No," Daniel said. He walked over to her, knelt, and looked her in the eye. "Not unless you want to." Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. "I want to stay. I want to stay with you and Evan." Evan stood beside her and took her hand like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Stay," he said. "You're our magic." Daniel's voice grew quieter. "There's more. While I was down there, the officers from CPS got a call from the police." Lucy's heart skipped. "There's a detective who's been investigating your foster home for months now. Your escape helped reopen the case. Other kids are starting to speak up." And he paused. "There's someone else who asked about you." Lucy frowned. "Who?" Daniel glanced at Mrs. Elkins, then back to Lucy. "Your grandmother." Lucy froze. She's alive." Her voice cracked. "She didn't know what happened to you," Daniel said gently. "She only found out recently. She's been trying to find you ever since. She just never had the right name, the right paperwork. It was buried under court files and sealed records." Lucy stood frozen in place. A grandmother. Someone who wanted her. "Where is she?" "On her way here," Daniel said. "She asked if she could meet you." "Only if you're ready." Lucy nodded slowly, heart pounding in her chest. Daniel reached for her hand, but Evan beat him to it. Together, they walked to the window. Down on the street below, a taxi pulled up. A woman stepped out, gray-haired, her coat too big, a red scarf blowing in the wind. She looked up toward the building, toward the penthouse window. And somehow, Lucy knew. She knew this wasn't the end. It was a beginning. Evan squeezed her hand. "Soup again tomorrow." Lucy smiled through the tears. "Yeah, but next time you help stir." Asterisk. The elevator chimed with a soft ding. Lucy stood near the door, her hands pressed flat against her sides, her heart pounding like the thunderstorm that had chased her down alleyways not so long ago. She wore clean clothes now, simple jeans and a soft blue sweater that still smelled faintly of lavender and lemon from Mrs. Elkins's laundry room. But none of it made her feel protected from what was about to happen. She was about to meet the last person in the world she ever expected to see. Daniel rested a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "If it's too much," he said gently, "you don't have to do anything. We can ask her to come another day, or not at all." Lucy shook her head. "No, I have to see." The elevator door slid open. The woman who stepped out looked both strong and fragile, like a porcelain teacup carefully glued back together after a fall. She had silver hair pinned into a bun, a face full of worry and hope, and eyes that immediately found Lucy like magnets. Lucy stared. The woman stepped forward slowly, then stopped. "You look just like her," she whispered. Her voice trembled. "My daughter. You have her chin and her fire." Lucy's breath hitched. She hadn't heard that name spoken in months. Not by someone who meant it. Not by someone who remembered her mother. I didn't know you were real," Lucy said. Her grandmother Helen smiled, though her eyes shined with tears. "Neither did I. They told me I wasn't fit to raise you after the accident, that you'd been placed in a good home. And then, nothing. No calls. No letters. Just silence." Daniel stepped forward. "With your permission, I had the CPS report pulled. Helen had her parental rights blocked by a private agency the foster system contracted. There were red flags, but no one followed up." Helen reached forward, trembling, not to grab Lucy, but to hold out her hand. "I never stopped looking for you." Lucy hesitated. Then slowly, she reached out. Her small fingers curled around her grandmother's hand. It felt warm, familiar, like something she'd only known in dreams. They didn't say anything more. They didn't need to. In the kitchen, Mrs. Elkins was already heating the last of the sunshine soup, just in case anyone needed a bowl to chase off the cold. Later that afternoon, Daniel called an emergency family meeting. Evan sat cross-legged on the floor, scribbling with markers. Lucy curled beside him, her head resting on his shoulder as he drew little suns and stars. Helen sat nearby, sipping tea, watching the two children with a mixture of awe and ache. Daniel cleared his throat. "There's another matter I wanted to talk about," he said. "Lucy, you should hear this too." Lucy straightened. "There are 3 other children," Daniel said slowly, "from your old foster home. They've been removed, temporarily, placed in shelters. But they're scared, not talking, barely eating." Lucy blinked. "Marcus, Lily, Carlos," Daniel nodded. "You knew them. They were younger than me," she said softly. "I used to tell them stories at night when it was scary. I taught them the soup song. Marcus always cried unless someone held his hand. They need someone they trust." Daniel said, "Someone who understands. CPS is asking if I would consider temporary placement." Lucy's heart clenched. "They'll be scared. They won't trust anyone." Evan looked up. "But they trust you." Lucy stared at Daniel. Can we bring them here?" Daniel hesitated. "Only if you're okay with it. It would mean more noise, more beds, more healing to do. But we have the space. We have the heart." Mrs. Elkins wiped a tear from her eye. "We have the soup, too." That evening, the penthouse lit up with warmth and noise. 3 children arrived. Marcus clung to Lucy's side the moment he saw her. Lily cried for an hour, but then curled up with Evan under a pile of blankets. Carlos stared at the ceiling, silent, until Lucy sang the first line of the Sunshine Soup song, and then he smiled. Helen helped fold the laundry. Mrs. Elkins made cookies. Daniel tried to read a picture book and mispronounced everything, making the kids laugh until they fell over. And Lucy? Lucy stood in the kitchen, her apron slightly crooked, teaching the little ones how to thank the potatoes. "This one," she said, placing a smooth potato on the counter, "is brave. It grew strong even though the dirt tried to bury it." Marcus nodded solemnly. "Thank you, Mr. Potato." Evan added, "Thank you for being smushy." They all laughed. When the soup simmered and the sun dipped below the skyline, Lucy leaned against the counter and looked around the room. Children laughing. A grandmother returned. A father no longer broken. A boy who smiled again. And her, not a problem. Child Dot, not a runaway. Not invisible, but a big sister, a healer. A heart that saved a family and helped build a new one. Daniel stepped beside her and whispered, "We'll call it the Sunshine Kitchen. A place for kids who need warmth. What do you think?" Lucy smiled. "I think it already is, outside." The city blinked with lights and winter wind. Inside, the soup bubbled softly. And love real, messy, beautiful love filled every corner. This wasn't the end of Lucy's story. It was just the beginning.